And OpenAI closing an $122 billion funding round that values it more than $850 billion. SpaceX filing confidentially for an IPO.
That's a big change in SpaceX getting that option.
So Anthropic is raising $30 billion. It's a $380 billion valuation, almost sort of double the valuation that it held in its last primary raise.
There's so little stock to be able to be traded. You have to think about the amount of passive capital out there in the market that's going to be buying just that $75 billion that's going to be tradable.
Now, I know what you're thinking, Alice. I know IPOs are not good investments, and I don't actually plan on buying any of these companies. Why should I care? And the answer is because these are not normal IPOs. These three companies are mega IPOs, and they can actually have a direct impact on your portfolio through your existing holdings. Specifically, those extremely popular low-cost index funds that everyone on the internet preaches you to buy, maybe even your financial advisor tells you to buy them, QQQ, VOO, those broad market index funds. If you are new here and you're wondering, who is this girl and why should I listen to her? My name is Alice, I am a CPA, and I have my own CFO advisory and wealth management firm. If you want to hear more from me, make sure you join my newsletter, and do me a favor, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Now, when I use the phrase mega IPOs, let's look at some numbers. SpaceX alone is targeting $1.75 trillion of valuation. That's 1.75 plus 10 zeros behind it. OpenAI just did a round at $852 billion. And Anthropic just did a $10 billion round that puts their valuation at $350. So with these three companies that are being led by the Albert Einsteins of our generation, they are valued at $3 trillion combined. But specifically from an IPO capital perspective, the IPO capital that is pouring into these three deals covers more than a decade's worth of IPO capital in 1 year. But why it matters to you here is that even if you have no interest or zero interest in buying any of these stocks, if you hold QQQ, if you hold VOO, if your 401k has a target date fund that holds QQQ or VOO, the long story short here is that these index funds will be forced to, or eventually be forced to buy into these three companies, potentially at inflated prices. And if these stock prices do come down the way that we've seen with some of the most recent IPOs, in fact, most IPOs kind of follow the similar trend anyways, then your portfolio again will absorb some of this hit. In order to get my point fully across here, I want to quickly talk about the general mechanics of how an IPO valuation works behind the scene and what actually causes that steep downward pressure that has been the case for a lot of IPOs. I'm going to use Figma here as a case study because I've talked about it before on my channel, and it's a good example of what can go wrong, even though any company here from this list is one that I could use. Now, IPOs are very highly publicized and celebratory events for founders and management teams that are working at the company. Okay, and very understandably so. These founders have worked long hours for years and years, management teams as well. They've had to pull off a lot in order to get the company to a position where they can go public, okay? And it's also a huge career milestone for the people who work there as well. And especially the case for VC and PE-backed private companies that are basically under a microscope once they get funding. When a private company raises a round of funding, the time on the clock basically starts to tick. And companies, they typically don't want to wait too long in between each series or let too much time go by, because that impacts the momentum and therefore the story and therefore what investors are willing to pay, aka the valuation of the company. Now, on top of the story, the timing and the environment to get maximum valuation matters as well. So I'll give you guys an example. There are a bunch of mining companies that have recently gone public because mining is hot right now. Mining is hot because precious metals spot prices, specifically gold, silver, and copper, have gone through the roof. So that makes for a very optimal story, timing, and environment for mining companies to go public. The issue with IPOs has nothing to do with the companies themselves, their products, their management teams, or even the investment banks behind the deals. These people are just doing their jobs, right? And they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. But as an investor, you have put your own hard-earned money and savings into these companies with the hope that they're going to generate you a return. The point is that there's two sides of the coin here with two groups of people with different motivations. Before a company goes public, especially if it's through a traditional IPO, the CEO and CFO go on what's called a IPO roadshow. And that's when they basically fly out to meet with a bunch of investors, investment banks, funds, and other institutions to basically build demand for the public offering. And during this process, the investment bank that the company hires They will try to build demand and urgency for the public offering. They will try to gauge what investors are willing to pay. And they are the ones who also decide who gets how many shares and at what price. And if there's more demand than supply on the book, then that naturally drives up the valuation of the company. And the investment bank that underwrites the deal is the one who decides how many shares get allocated and the final valuation or the multiple that the company is going to be IPOing at. So when the company actually goes public, let's say for Figma, they IPO'd at $33 a share, right? And that's not the price that hits the public market. This is the price that the institutional investors who received allocations at are paying. And this is not a public event. This is all private off of the exchange. When the opening price for the first trade on the stock exchange hits, it could be a completely different number. And usually it goes up, right? So for Figma, they closed at $115 by the end of day one of the day they went public. So that pop between $33 to $115, that's the return that the institutions are getting. That's what makes IPO so sexy and glamorous. So if somebody said that they bought, for example, the Figma IPO and they got it at $115, they didn't actually buy the IPO. They bought the aftermarket of it. It's only the institutions who get an allocation at the $33 range that actually bought in at the IPO. So with Figma, they IPO'd at $33, popped to $115, and eventually hit $142. Today, they're trading around $21 a share. So that's an 85% decline from day one and still 35% below the IPO price. To understand what's going on here, we have to think internally about how a public company is run and basically the organic milestones that happen or need to happen to support a stock's price. The price of a stock is basically what investors are willing to pay based on what they perceive that the earnings power, growth potential, and discounted cash flows of the company that they're investing in will provide back to them. Basically, Figma and a lot of these companies that go public through IPOs, they cannot sustain the level of valuation that they're at the IPO through organic business milestones. What exactly are organic business milestones? Now, for a less mature company, it would be things like hitting positive EBITDA consistently, being free cash flow positive, and then showing free cash flow growth, improving gross margins from scale. And for some of the bigger companies, growth would be getting institutional buy-in from bigger funds, which is usually the $1 billion market cap threshold. Index fund inclusion, that's huge. Getting more analyst coverage from the bigger banks.
Think of the S&P 500, think of the NASDAQ 100. If you can get your stock into those indexes, that can really propel the growth and the value of your underlying share price.
All of these things are organic business milestones that are positive signals to investors that give them the confidence of the company's earning power, growth, and cash flows. When a public company releases earnings every quarter, the CFO will provide guidance to their investors based on what they're forecasting. Guidance is a very important part of running a public company, and there is a very high degree of skill and finesse and forecasting involved to give accurate numbers. On one hand, if management team CFO is giving phony numbers to lowball analysts, that will immediately hurt their reputation and trust. But at the same time, the CFO also wants to give a number that supports the share price and one that they believe that they can beat, while also factoring in execution risk. And macro factors as well. So while Figma has good gross margins, 82%, that's a big part of their selling story. They were almost acquired by Adobe. They are free cash flow positive. They are stuck with a lot of stock-based comp, but the guidance and earnings that they've put out does not support them being valued at $115. In other words, there basically is a gap between what was pitched, what was sold, what was believed during the IPO, and therefore what was bought in on, and what the company is actually doing in terms of fundamentals and results. And this is not unusual. This is not just Figma. It is most companies that go through an IPO. It is just the nature of the mechanics of how the IPO gets priced, that whole IPO roadshow process, how the story gets sold. If you look at any of the recent IPOs, again, they're all like that, which is why as an investor, and you know this, that IPOs are not good investments because they tend to be priced far ahead of what the company has actually done in actual results. Okay, then we have to talk about the insiders. So this could be anywhere from the early friends and family who gave the founder money when no one else believed in them. Could also be PE, VC, and their book of clients. Regardless of who they are, people who got in early have had to tie up their capital in a extremely illiquid investment. When you invest in a private company, you can't just ask for your money back. Some earlier investors will see IPOs as a liquidity event. And for their own personal reasons that impact their own personal finances, they may choose to sell. Management can also sell shares as well during open trading windows. And this selling starts to happen combined with the fact that management guidance might not support the current valuation valuation, the stock price starts to drop. Traders, I'm sure, have also picked up on trends of how IPOs play out, and they will presumably trade IPOs as well. Then other investors, they start seeing the downward trend. Some of them may panic and they will start to sell, and it starts becoming this self-reinforcing downward spiral. Okay, so bringing this all back to your 401k. Normally, there are rules for a company to be included in benchmark indices. The S&P 500, for example, requires 4 quarters of profitability. The NASDAQ 100 requires a company be public for a certain number of days. This is what they call the observation period, and also a minimum public float. A public float is basically the number of shares that a company holds available to trade on public markets. These rules basically exist to protect the integrity of the index. It is public knowledge that companies that get into an index are safe investments for investors.
Because SpaceX is so large and because these companies are staying private longer and longer and longer, they're allowing this change where after the first 15 days of trading, they will allow these companies into the index.
But some of these rules are starting to change. So starting on May 1st of this year, NASDAQ is now eliminating the 10% minimum float requirement. And they're also adding a fast track provision, meaning that, for any publicly company that is now being listed, they can actually join the NASDAQ index after just 15 trading days. S&P and the FTSE Russell are also considering similar fast track rules as well. SpaceX is expected to float only 5 to 8% of their shares, which means that at a $2 trillion valuation, about $100 billion of their shares will be tradable. Index funds like QQQ that are required to automatically purchase companies that are included in these indices will basically be forced to invest in SpaceX, regardless of what they are trading at. QQQ is a passively managed index fund. They cannot raise cash. Their investment thesis is just to track the index. And so when SpaceX gets automatically added to the NASDAQ 100, the index fund, QQQ, has to sell some of their existing holdings to rebalance. So it's highly likely that passive funds like QQQ will be forced to buy into SpaceX at inflated prices within 15 days of SpaceX going public. Early investors are not going to be able to sell within these 15 days. The lockup period for early investors is usually 3 to 6 months after the company goes public. But either way, if SpaceX or OpenAI even follow a mild version of what some of these other IPOs have happened in the past, including Figma, their losses are going to get baked into QQQ and funds like VOO and into your target date fund that holds passive index investments. So for a very long time now, passive managed low index funds have been sold as the safe bet, the right thing to do. Buy it, hold it, set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about individual company risk. And you can reap market returns without having a finance degree and studying the markets 24/7. Because of the magnitude of SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic, this is now going to be challenged. But these mega IPOs are projected to have such large market caps, meaning that their movement in stock price can basically drive the entire index. So as a passive investor of one of these index funds, you're not really getting full exposure to the market anymore. You are now exposing yourself to the risk of valuations that have not been tested and have potentially been overvalued at the IPO. I've talked a lot about SpaceX, but I also want to talk about OpenAI and Anthropic and the numbers around them as well. So OpenAI just closed a recent round of funding, which put them at $850 billion valuation. And they were backed by some pretty big names, including Amazon, NVIDIA, and SoftBank. Now, OpenAI is a private company, but they are estimated to generate about $2 billion a month in revenue. And they have over 900 million active users weekly. The key thing with OpenAI is they are not profitable yet, and they are reportedly targeting a IPO at around $1 trillion valuation. They have told investors they expect to hit $280 billion of revenue by 2030. So within 5 years, they're expecting revenue to grow from 24 to 280 billion. So that's 10x growth. Extremely aggressive, but they're also on the revolutionary forefront of artificial intelligence. This is just my own opinion, but there's also something to be said about Anthropic and their IPO. Because even though OpenAI is the bigger company that's been around for longer, as an end user, I feel like product for product, Opus 4.6 is actually better than GPT 5.2. With what OpenAI is projecting in terms of revenue growth, that's like growth numbers that have not been achieved or sustained by any technology company right now at scale, at this amount of scale. So if buying a stock after they've gone public through an IPO is not a good idea, Let's talk about some of these pre-IPO funds that are extremely popular right now.
So for those that are trying to grow their assets under management, they've been talking a lot about democratization of private assets. Do you think that was an overreach for this industry?
Well, I mean, democratization, it's obviously not a bad word. It's an investor base that's not as used to this product set, to the long-term nature of it, to the fact that it can be cyclical.
I'm going to talk about two of them in particular, ARK Venture and Fundrise Innovation. These two funds basically promise investors an opportunity to invest in these private companies and be able to get some of the upside of these IPOs, specifically that pop that I'm talking about on day one. And let me explain them for what they are. So ARK Venture was founded by a very, very savvy and brilliant businesswoman named Cathie Wood. And she basically created a group of ETFs, and one of them called ARK Venture Fund. They hold positions in SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic, and about 60 other companies. It's a closed fund, meaning that it's not available all the time, like how you would be able to go onto Robinhood and trade Tesla stock, but it is marketed to individual investors as a way to get pre-IPO access with a very small amount of money invested. Okay, you only need to have $500 to be able to get a piece of this upside. My biggest criticism of this one is the annual fee. So they charge 2.9%, which for context is extremely, extremely expensive. Even most private wealth managers and boutique investment banks that manage client capital, they will usually charge between 1 to 2% on an assets under management basis. So 2.9 is very, very high. And so you're paying this huge premium to have quote unquote access to a company that may or may not justify their private valuation when they eventually do go public. Fundrise Innovation Fund is one that's more recent. So they listed on the New York Stock Exchange in mid-March. They are a closed-end fund that, very similarly to the ARK funds, basically hold stake in private investments like SpaceX, Anthropic, and some other big pre-IPO tech names, marketed to investors as an opportunity to capture some of this upside by buying into their fund. So this one went a little crazy. After they went public, they had a huge shoot up in the stock price, and then they went down 67% in 2 days. There was actually a research company that published a short report on them. I have not spent a ton of time researching these funds, but I would argue that some of these ETFs and funds are more or less seeing this as a business opportunity and a fancy way to market it to investors who might not fully understand what they're buying. So when you buy into something like Fundrise Innovation Fund and whatever you're willing to pay for it, that's actually not you getting into the SpaceX IPO, depending on how much of a premium there is between what you're paying and what they're trading for above NAV. If you guys like this video today, you're gonna love my other video on what's going on with the private credit industry. Link up top here. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until next time.